Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Dark Paladin deck. This deck is insanely good and really fun to play around with. You can end with some really crazy boards, like having at least 1 to 2 Dark Paladin, a copy of Verte Anaconda, Dragoons, and even some really awesome Buster Blader plays, where you can summon the Buster Blader, the Dragon Destruction Swordsman, along with a Buster Dragon, to be able to totally skill drain your opponent's side of the field. This deck is actually one of the more crazy decks that I've built, and really fun to play around with. I wanted to build a deck based around Dark Paladin, and man, does this deck work. It's really fun to play around with, and Buster Blader's even been topping recently with all the Dragon Link playing around with, that have been playing around in the meta, and so I'm really excited to actually see how Dark Paladin will fare against them, being able to boost himself up by so many attack points. So, without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, because we have some awesome rewards for you guys, like getting your name description for every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, or even getting to request a deck profile every single month that you're a patron, along with test hands. So, without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Dark Magician. Dark Magician is one of the main cards that you're going to be playing in this deck, because you're going to be trying to use it as fusion material to summon out your copy of Dark Paladin, or even Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. This card is really easy to get out on your side of the field, especially with cards like Fusion Deployment, and it's really pivotal to see it in your opening hand. We then play 3 copies of Buster Blader. This is another one of those cards that you just need to play as a 3 of for consistency reasons. It's just an amazing card, especially with Dragon Link running around like crazy. This card gains 500 attack for every Dragon-type monster your opponent's out of the field and in their graveyard. You can summon just this card out and just about OTK your opponent in today's metagame. It's really insane how good this card is and how easy it is to summon in this particular build as well. And it's really pivotal that you play it along with your copies of your prologue of the Destruction Sword and Destruction Sword Memories, so this card is extremely important for the deck. We then play a single copy of Red Eye's Black Dragon. Red Eye's Black Dragon is really cool because you need it to summon out your copy of Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. It's really easy to summon out 1 to 2 Dragoons in this deck, but it's really nice to have that Red Eye's Black Dragon just to summon out your copy of Dragoons with being able to pop 2 cards. We then play 2 copies of Apprentice Illusion Magician. Apprentice Illusion Magician is really good because it searches Dark Magician from your deck. You discard a card from your hand to the graveyard, which can be a copy of your, Dragon Buster, the Destruction Sword, or it can be any of your other cards that you just don't particularly need in your hand, like a copy of Destruction Sword Memories, or even a Destruction Sword with some infusion. It just depends on what you have in your hand, depends on what you can get rid of. Duplicate cards, whatever you need. This card can special summon itself to your side of the field, which can be great for link materials, and it can send itself from your side of the field to the graveyard or your hand to the graveyard to boost a Dark Spellcaster type monster on your side of the field up by 2,000 attack and defense, which can be really good. We then play 3 copies of Keeper of Dragon Magic. So Keeper of Dragon Magic is really good because it lets you reveal in your extra deck a fusion monster, like for instance Dark Paladin, and then either special summon from your graveyard Dark Magician or Buster Blader from your graveyard in face down defense position. It also lets you, in its normal or special summon, discard a card to be able to add a copy of Polymerization from your deck to your hand, which is super good in this deck to be able to just search Polymerization to go off with your particular plays. It does lock you into fusion summoning, but that's not that big of a deal in this particular deck. We then play 3 copies of King of the Swamp, which is essentially like playing 3 more copies of Buster Blader, 3 more copies of Dark Magician, and 3 more copies of Polymerization all at the same time, because this card can search Polymerization on being discarded, can be used as a fusion material to summon out your copy of Dark Paladin with your copy of Buster Blader or Dark Magician, and can even summon out Red Eye's Dark Dragoon because it specifically lists Dark Magician. This card's really good in this deck to be able to just discard and add your fusion spell from your deck to your hand. Now for the normal summons, we play a single copy of Dragon Buster, the Destruction Sword. Dragon Buster, the Destruction Sword, you rarely summon, but usually you're going to equip it to a monster and target a Buster Blader, and then make it so your opponent can't special summon from the extra deck, which is really easy, especially with your copy of Union Carrier in this deck. Then for the best normal summon in this entire deck, and that's 3 copies of Buster Whelp of the Destruction Sword. This card, when it's normal summon, lets you add a Destruction Sword card from your deck to your hand, and it also lets you tribute it to be able to special summon a Buster Blader from your hand or graveyard. And if this card's in your graveyard and you control Buster Blader, you can discard a Destruction Sword card to special summon this card. You're always going to want to search your copy of Prologue, because Prologue is going to let you send a Buster Blader and a copy of the Destruction Sword Memories from your deck to the graveyard, card to be able to summon out your copy of your particular monster that you need. It's really, really helpful to have this card as a 3-up. We then play 3 copies of Magician's Soul. Magician's Soul is really, really, really good in this deck because this card is a free special summon to your side of the field by sending a spellcaster that's level 6 or higher, which we play a bunch of those in this deck. We play 5 in this deck that you can send from deck to graveyard. It's really helpful too because it works as a small draw engine as well, because if you send a level 6 or higher spellcaster monster to the graveyard, then you can special summon this card from your hand or send it to the graveyard to special summon a Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from your graveyard. And it also has the ability that you can send 2 spells or traps from your hand to the graveyard, and then you get to draw 2 cards or as many cards as you sent, which is really good to be able to draw those additional cards for this particular deck. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we are going to be right off the bat playing 3 copies of Polymerization. This card's really good in the deck, really nice to have in your hand, and you have a lot of generic fusions in this deck that can get you into some crazy plays. This card is really good in this deck, and it's so searchable, it's ridiculous. 1 copy of Eye of Timaeus. Eye of Timaeus is if you use Fusion Deployment and you have this card in your hand, you can just instantly go in for a copy of your Dark Magician, into your Dark Paladin or your Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, or even Dark Cavalry in the extra deck. It just depends on what you need for the situation. We then play a single copy of Red Eyes Fusion. Red Eyes Fusion is really good in this deck too. Red Eyes Fusion, you just activate it and go directly into Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. We play a single copy of the Destruction Swordsman Fusion. This card's essentially Super Polymerization. What this card does is it lets you fusion summon from your extra deck a Buster Blader monster, or a fusion monster that lists Buster Blader on it, which is really good, because it lets you either fusion summon into your Dark Paladin or your Buster Blader, the Destruction Swordsman. And you can use monsters from your hand or either side of the field as fusion materials, and if this card is in your graveyard, then you can send a card from your hand to the grave and add it back to your hand. So it's like a recurring polymerization, so it's a good one-of in this deck. We then play 2 copies of Magical Eyes Fusion. I never mind drawing into this card. It's really ridiculous when you actually see this card in an opening hand, and you have like Dark Magician, Buster Blader, a Polymerization, and a copy of this. You're going to essentially get out 2 copies of Dark Paladin on your side of the field, and it's really ridiculous. We then play 3 copies of Fusion Deployment. Fusion Deployment is actually the reason I wanted to build this deck, is because you can just activate Fusion Deployment, reveal Dark Paladin, and then special summon either Dark Magician or Buster Blader from your deck. It does lock you into fusion summoning, but that's not that big of a deal, because you're usually just going to summon into a Dark Paladin or a Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, or both on that particular turn, set a copy of Prologue, let your opponent go, flip the copy of Prologue, summon out Buster Blader, the Dragon Destruction Swordsman, and a copy of Buster Dragon, lock your opponent's field down, and then OTK them the very next turn, which is the way the deck pretty much functions. So, that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Destruction Sword Flash, 2 copies of Destruction Sword Memory, and 3 copies of Prologue of the Destruction Sword. So the reason you're playing pretty much the exact same lineup for your copies of your Buster Blader is pretty much, these are the best ones. Like, your copy of the Destruction Sword Flash, if you have Dark Paladin on your side of the field, or you have the Dragon Destruction Swordsman on your side of the field, you banish all monsters on your opponent's side of the field, which is really, really, really good. The Destruction Sword Memories lets you fusion summon into a copy of your Buster Blader, the Dragon Destruction Swordsman, by using materials that are in your graveyard. And then Prologue lets you send from your deck to the graveyard a Destruction Sword and a Buster Blader to special summon Buster Dragon from your extra deck, which is really, really good. So, that's pretty much it for the traps. This one's the best one. If you don't have the budget for Magician Souls, but you still want to build the Dark Paladin deck, you can essentially drop Magician Souls and play 3 copies of Trap Trick in its place, just so you can search your copy of Prologue, which will work. It'll slow the deck down just a little bit, but it still works. So, that's it for the traps, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing double Dark Paladin. I have never said that on this channel. We're playing 2 copies of Dark Paladin. This card's insanely good, and a lot of people overlook this card, but it's actually really good still. It really, in my opinion, yes, it's the reason I built this deck was because Dragoons is essentially a retrain of Dark Paladin, except instead of using Buster Blader, you're using Red Eyes Black Dragon. But this card is the OG and the original, like, boss that I fell in love with, and one of the reasons I actually started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And really like kept playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Was because of this card. I still remember being in Walmart and them having like the little packages that had this in the front of it, and I got one, and I still have one of these sealed in the original packaging, never been opened. But this card's really neat. What it does is it has to be special summoned by fusion summoning, and as long as this card remains faceable on the field, you can negate the activation of one spell card and destroy it by discarding one card from your hand. Which is pretty much an omni-negate for spell cards, which is really good. And then the attack of this card is increased by 500 for each dragon-type monster on the field and in either player's graveyard. We stack up the graveyard with dragons all the time. Like when you get this card out, I've summoned this out without even interaction with the opponent at 44 really quickly, because of summoning out Dragoons and other cards. This card's really good, and a really, really interesting card to play in this deck. We then play 2 copies of Red Eyes Dark Dragoons. Red Eyes Dark Dragoons is really good. It's very generic, like, people are using this in everything, but I wanted to build a deck that was based around it and Dark Paladin. It's really easy to summon this deck. It's untargetable. It can pop 2 cards a turn, or 2 monsters per turn. Your opponent takes damage for it, as long as you put 2 normal monsters into this card, and then also it can negate something by discarding a card from your hand. It is the retrain of Dark Paladin, and it's like amazing, and I foresee it probably getting banned in the future, but it's still really good for right now. Like, it's probably one of the best cards ever created in Yu-Gi-Oh! But it's just an overall amazing card. We then play a single copy of Dark Cavalry. Dark Cavalry is ridiculously easy to go into this deck because it just takes a Dark Magician and a Warrior monster, and it gains 100 attack for each spell or trap on the field and in the graveyards, and if this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict damage to your opponent, if it inflicts piercing damage, and then it also has the ability that when a card or effect is activated that targets a card on the field, you can quick effect discard a card and negate the activation if you destroy it. It's a really good card, and it's really easy to summon in this deck. We then play 2 copies of the Buster Blader Fusion, the Dragon Destruction Swordsman. You summon this card really all the time in this deck, because this card essentially makes it where all the dragons on your opponent's side of the field have their effects negated, they're switched to defense, and it gains 1,000 attack for every dragon on the field, and it can attack all monsters your opponent controls that are dragons, and also it has a really neat effect that if it attacks, inflicts piercing damage. So if your opponent has like 5 dragons on the field, this goes up to 7,800. This card is really ridiculous. Basically, you're using these to negate, and then this one is the powerhouse to end the game. We then play 2 copies of Buster Dragon. Buster Dragon just special summons Buster Blader from the graveyard. It turns everything on the field into a dragon, which is really good. If you don't have a Buster Blader on your side of the field, during your opponent's turn, you can target a Buster Blader you control and equip it with a dragon or a Destruction Sword monster in your graveyard, which is going to be your copy of the Destruction Sword to be able to make it so they can't special summon from your extra deck. And also, it makes so all monsters your opponent control become dragon, which basically locks them down and makes it skill drain. We then play a single copy of Flare Metal Dragon. Flare Metal Dragon is just really good. You can actually bring back Red Eyes Black Dragon from the graveyard in this deck with this card by detaching a material if you use like Buster Blader and a Dark Magician on your side of the field. It's really easy to summon, and every time your opponent breathes, they take 500. We then play a single copy of Union Carrier. Union Carrier can equip the Destruction Sword to a monster on your side of the field. Really easy to summon, really easy to be able to stop your opponent from summoning from extra deck. 2 copies of Anaconda. Anaconda is really pivotal in this deck because you play so many targets to actually utilize this card. I played it 2. I think this card's going to get limited, but you play Polymerization, you play Fusion Deployment, which Fusion Deployment is live with this card. You can actually activate Fusion Deployment from the deck using this card, which gets you a Dark Magician or a Buster Blader on your side of the field, or Red Eyes. And then also, it can be used with your copy of, it can be used with Polymerization, Magical Eyes Fusion, Red Eyes Fusion, the Destruction Swordsman Fusion, and Fusion Deployment. So you have pretty much every single spell in your deck except Eye of Timaeus can be used with this card, which is really ridiculous. It gives you access to every single one of them. And then we play a single copy of Link Rebo. Link Rebo is really good in the deck too because you can use it with your copies of your Buster Welt to summon out this card to your side of the field to make it so you can block attacks while you're trying to, if you're trying to get set up. Like, I rarely break in this deck, but like sometimes you'll need to get set up like a turn because you'll set the copy of Prologue and you'll want to bait your opponent. With this, put it on your side of the field, and then flip the copy of Prologue, and your opponent will know what hit him. We then play a single copy of Relinquished Anima. Relinquished Anima is really good because it can take an opponent's monster. It's really, really good at being able to just take an opponent's problematic monster, or at least bait out a hand trap or bait out a card that your opponent's going to try and negate, and then before you're going to summon out your copy of Dark Paladin or Dragoons. This card's really good to be able to just stop certain cards. So, that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. It's insanely fun to play around with, and it's just one of those, like, like, I know that a lot of people are putting Dragoons and everything, but I wanted to make a deck that was just solely focused on Dark Paladin, and then Dragoons is kind of like a backup plan if you need it. But they come out together in this deck really odd. Like, I will seriously end with a board. I usually end with a board like that looks like this, where you have Dark Paladin, Dragoons, a copy of the Buster Blader, a copy of the Buster Dragon. Now, this is during the opponent's turn. During my turn, I summon out these two, and then end with a prologue set, and then I summon these two on my opponent's turn, and then I'll end with like a copy of Anaconda as well. So I'll have something like this on my opponent's turn, and when they pass, I just OTK them with a field like this. I mean, they can't handle it because they can't deal with cards like this, and then this is negate for a spell, and this is negate for anything. So they can't really do all that much to deal with this particular deck. So it makes it really interesting, and it's really fun to play around with. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can come part of our notification squad, and definitely tell me what you think of this deck down in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.